There is something on your garden path right now that you have been stepping over for years without a second thought. Not a crack, not a stain. A trail. A thin ribbon of silver, wet and slightly raised, almost luminous in the early morning light, curving between the stones in a line so precise it almost looks intentional, crossing the lip of a pot, tracing the base of a wall, disappearing into the dark soil at the garden's edge. You probably saw it this morning and your first thought was exactly what everyone's first thought is: slug. Nuisance. Problem. And your second thought was probably salt, or pellets, or the heel of a boot. Stop. Because what is actually leaving that trail, and what that trail is actually made of, is one of the most scientifically extraordinary things happening in your garden right now. And the moment you understand what you are looking at, you will never reach for the salt again. Today we are going to follow that silver line. We are going to find out who left it, what it is made of, and why the creature behind it may be doing something far more important for your soil, your plants, and even your own health than anything you have ever purchased from a garden center. Because the trail on your garden path is not a sign of damage. It is a sign of biology so sophisticated that researchers in 4 countries are currently trying to replicate it in a laboratory. Let's start at the beginning. The trail was left by a gastropod, a snail or slug, and the substance it is made of is called mucin. You have probably heard it described simply as slime, as if that is all there is to say about it. But mucin is one of the most chemically complex biological substances produced by any invertebrate on the planet. It is not a simple secretion. It is a living material, a gel composed of proteins, glycoproteins, hyaluronic acid, allantoin, collagen, and more than 40 other bioactive compounds, all produced in real time, in precise concentrations, by a living organism navigating your garden. That trail left on your stone is, in the most literal sense, a pharmaceutical. Research published in the journal Molecules in 2020 identified antimicrobial properties in gastropod mucin strong enough to inhibit the growth of Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli in controlled conditions. Wound healing experiments using Helix aspersa secretions documented accelerated tissue repair in laboratory models. The cosmetics industry has known this for years. The ingredient you may have noticed on high-end skin care products, Helix aspersa Muller glycoconjugates, is extracted from the same species whose trail you found on your garden path this morning. You have been stepping on a pharmaceutical factory. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I remember the first time I read the research on this and had to put the paper down. Not a garden pest. Not a nuisance. An organism producing, in real time, a compound that scientists are actively trying to synthesize in laboratories. And it is doing this on your stone path, every night, for free. But the biology of the trail is only the beginning of what makes these animals so misunderstood. Because the real story is not about the slime. It is about what the animal is doing with it, and why. Gastropods do not wander. This is the first and most important thing to understand, and it is the thing that most people get completely wrong. The trail on your path did not get there because a slug randomly crossed your garden overnight. Gastropods are extraordinarily sensitive organisms. They detect chemical gradients in the air, vibrations in the soil, humidity changes measured in fractions of a percent, and the molecular signatures of organic matter in states of decomposition that no human instrument can detect at ground level. When a gastropod moves through your garden at night, it is not wandering. It is reading. It is following information. And the information it is following is almost always about organic matter that is already dead or dying. The primary diet of the vast majority of gastropod species found in temperate gardens is not living plant tissue. It is decaying material. Decomposing leaves, rotting wood fragments, fungal threads, the cellular remains of plants that have already finished their life cycle. Gastropods are detritivores, primary decomposers, occupying the same ecological role in your garden that pill bugs occupy in the soil beneath your pots, processing dead organic matter into forms that soil bacteria and fungi can work with further. The slug crossing your lettuce at night is not necessarily eating your lettuce. It may be eating the decomposing organic matter trapped between the leaves and the soil surface. It may be consuming the fungal growth on decaying matter beneath the plant. The distinction matters enormously, and it is a distinction that no one ever explains. Research conducted at multiple European agricultural institutions has confirmed that the species most commonly blamed for garden damage, the grey field slug Detritivores reticulatum, preferentially targets soft, already damaged, or senescing plant tissue over healthy living plants when given a choice. The damage you see in the morning is often not evidence of a healthy plant being attacked from outside. It is evidence of a plant that was already weakened, and that a highly sensitive organism detected and responded to before you even noticed anything was wrong. The gastropod is not the cause of the problem. It is the first responder to a problem that already existed. Now here is where the story becomes something that most gardeners have never been told, and once you hear it, you will not be able to look at your garden the same way again. The presence of slugs and snails in your garden is a biological signal. Not a neutral one. A precise one. Gastropods require three things to thrive in a garden: moisture, organic matter, and calcium. Calcium is the one that most people have never considered. Snails in particular require significant dietary calcium to build and maintain their shells. And the primary source of that calcium in a garden environment is the soil itself. Soils rich in calcium are soils with a pH balance that supports healthy decomposer communities, healthy earthworm populations, and the microbial networks that make nutrients available to plant roots. A snail population in your garden is, by this logic, a passive but remarkably accurate reading of the mineral richness of your soil. The gardeners who have the most snails often have the most biologically active soil. The gardens that have been stripped of them through repeated chemical treatment often have soil that has lost the mineral diversity that supported them in the first place. You have been eliminating your soil's health indicator and replacing it with something that does not read anything at all. Let that settle for a moment. The animal you have been poisoning is the most accurate living measure of your soil's health that exists. No test kit, no laboratory. A snail, reading your soil in real time, every night, telling you by its very presence that the ground beneath your garden is alive. But there is one more dimension to this story, one that goes beyond soil chemistry and decomposition and into something that is only now being explored by researchers with the tools to measure it. Gastropods do not just consume organic matter. They transform it. What passes through a gastropod's digestive system emerges as mucus-coated, microbe-inoculated castings that are, by measurable chemical analysis, richer in available nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium than the material that entered. The trail you see on your garden path in the morning is not just a movement record. It is a deposition of processed organic material, a thin line of microbially active matter, laid across the surface of your soil, everywhere the animal traveled. Your garden has been receiving a nightly fertilization treatment, applied by a living organism, to the exact locations where organic matter is available to process. For free. Every night. And you have been washing it off with a hose. There is something else. Something that the people who reach for the poison pellets never consider, because it concerns not the gastropod itself but what happens downstream when you remove it from the food chain. Gastropods are prey. They are primary prey for a range of garden animals that most gardeners actively want in their space: ground beetles, hedgehogs, slow worms, frogs, toads, song thrushes, and blackbirds. These are precisely the animals whose absence from urban gardens is most lamented by ecologists. They are absent, in large part, because the food source that sustained them has been systematically eliminated. A garden treated repeatedly with iron phosphate or metaldehyde pellets does not just lose its slugs. It loses the ground beetles that ate them. It loses the hedgehogs that followed the beetles. It loses the birds that listened for the crunch. The slug was not a single nuisance creature. It was the base of a food web. And when you removed it, the web collapsed inward, quietly, over years, until the garden fell silent in ways you may have noticed without ever understanding why. So what should you actually do? The answer is more practical and more specific than most people expect. The first thing to understand is that not all gastropod activity is the same, and the kind that genuinely damages plants is almost entirely confined to one scenario: seedlings and very young transplants with no established root system, in conditions of high moisture and high organic matter, at night. This is the only situation in which gastropods pose a real risk to plants that you care about. And it is entirely manageable without chemistry, without salt, without killing anything. Copper tape around seed trays genuinely works. The mild electrical charge produced by the reaction between gastropod mucin and copper is enough to deter crossing. It does not kill. It redirects. A gritty barrier of crushed eggshell or sharp horticultural grit around young transplants creates a tactile deterrent. Gastropods move on a single muscular foot. Surfaces they find uncomfortable to cross, they avoid. And raising seedlings to a size where their root systems are established before planting out removes the vulnerability window entirely. Established plants with healthy root systems are not meaningfully damaged by gastropods. They never were. The damage you have seen in established beds is almost always from plants that were already stressed, already weakened by drought, poor drainage, compacted soil, or root competition, and that a sensitive organism detected before you did. The silver trail on your garden path is not a warning sign. It is a report. It is a nightly survey of the organic matter in your garden, conducted by an animal that has been doing this work for 500 million years, whose biology is sophisticated enough to interest medical researchers, whose presence indicates soil health rather than soil failure, and whose removal quietly unravels the food web that every bird and beetle and hedgehog you have ever wanted in your garden depends on. The trail is not the problem. It never was. The trail is the most honest thing in your garden, a line drawn in living chemistry across the surface of the earth, telling you exactly what is there and what is being taken care of. Leave it. Watch where it goes. Ask yourself not how to stop it, but what it is finding. Because the answer to that question will tell you more about the real health of your garden than anything you have ever bought in a plastic bottle. Have you ever watched a snail or slug move through your garden at night, or found a trail and wondered what it was doing there? Tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one, and this community has some of the most extraordinary observations I have ever encountered. And if you want to understand another creature that has been doing invisible, essential work in your garden for longer than you can imagine, one whose presence most people have never even thought to notice, the next video is already waiting for you.